The little black girl hid behind the storage hall as someone called her name while searching the hospital wing. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's dive into today's story. Maya was just a little girl, barely 9 years old, with wide, frightened eyes that were constantly darting around as she hid behind the storage hall. Her heart pounded as she tried to steady her breathing, keeping herself as still as possible, praying no one would find her. The sound of hurried footsteps echoed down the hallway of Mercy General Hospital, followed by a voice she recognized. "Maya, where are you?" The voice was calm, but carried an edge of authority. It wasn't the voice of someone worried about her. It was the voice of someone searching for her, and she was scared. She pressed herself further into the shadows behind the storage area, clutching her stuffed bear close to her chest. It was the only comfort she had in that moment of terror. Maya had no idea what was going on. She didn't understand why she was hiding, why her mother wasn't there, and why the man who had brought her to the hospital wasn't helping her. Her stepfather, Officer Patrick Donovan, had been kind at first, but lately, his anger had grown darker, and Maya felt like she couldn't escape the fear that constantly loomed over her. It was supposed to be a simple visit, but then something happened, something that changed everything. As soon as they arrived at the hospital, Maya had noticed the nurse's suspicious glance and the tense conversations in the hallway. She didn't understand the whispers, but she could feel the weight of the situation. It was as if something was wrong, terribly wrong, and now, she was hiding. Not because she didn't want to be found, but because she was scared of what might happen if she was. She heard footsteps growing louder, coming closer, and she felt her body freeze. "Maya, this is getting ridiculous. Where are you?" The voice was sharper now, more insistent. Maya closed her eyes tightly, praying to stay unnoticed. She knew she had to stay quiet, that she couldn't let anyone find her, especially him. She had tried to stop him earlier when he grabbed her, but he was stronger than her, and she was too scared to speak. She just kept thinking about her father's dying wish, the promise he had made to his best friend, Jack Forge, to protect Maya no matter what. She didn't know how, but she felt like someone good, would come for her. Someone would keep her safe. The footsteps paused outside the storage hall. Maya's breath caught in her throat, but she dared not make a sound. She held her bear tighter, her hands trembling, her small frame shaking from the fear coursing through her. Was it him? Was it someone else? She waited, listening intently, hoping, praying, that someone would find her before it was too late. "I'm here to protect you, Maya," the voice said softly, with authority and warmth. Maya barely registered the words as her body finally relaxed. It was Jack Forge, the man her father had trusted to keep her safe. But how could he be here? How had he found her? In the next few seconds, everything around her seemed to blur. The sound of footsteps grew distant as the man searching for her stepped away. She felt a gentle hand on her shoulder, and she finally opened her eyes. There he was, the man who had promised to protect her father's daughter. Jack Forge. He crouched down to her level, his eyes steady and calm, the familiar face that she had not seen since she was a little girl. His leather jacket, worn from years of riding, gleamed in the dim light. His presence was commanding yet comforting. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice a low whisper that only Maya could hear. Maya's lips trembled as she nodded. "I'm scared," she whispered. Jack nodded solemnly, understanding the fear that gripped her. "You don't need to be afraid anymore. I'm here now." Slowly, he helped her to her feet, keeping his hand on her back. "Come on, let's get you out of here." As they moved away from the storage hall, Maya couldn't help but feel a small sense of relief. Jack Forge, with his years of experience in the military and as a biker, had always been a protector. She had seen him during the funeral of her father, when he promised to look after her. He had kept that promise, even when it seemed impossible. The two of them moved swiftly, Jack leading the way, his eyes scanning every corner. The hospital felt cold, too quiet, with an eerie silence that seemed to follow them. As they walked, Maya tried to keep up, but her small legs struggled to match his pace. Jack slowed down, allowing her to walk beside him. "You're safe now," he reassured her. though he knew the danger wasn't over yet. Maya looked up at him, her face still pale from the shock. "Why are you here?" she asked. "How did you find me?" Jack glanced down at her, his face hardening as he spoke. "I got a call. Someone told me you were in trouble. Your father, Tyrone, made me promise to protect you if anything ever happened to him." Maya's heart skipped a beat at the mention of her father. She hadn't heard his name spoken in years. He had been killed in Afghanistan, saving Jack's life. Maya had been only 5 years old when her father passed away. She barely remembered him, just the stories Jack had told her. The two of them rounded a corner, and suddenly, the tension in the air grew thicker. The sound of voices echoed through the hallway ahead, familiar voices. Jack paused for a moment, his hand going to the knife strapped to his belt. Maya could hear it now, too, the unmistakable voice of Officer Patrick Donovan. He was still searching for her. "We need to move, now," Jack said, his voice low but urgent. He took Maya's hand and led her to a nearby elevator, pressing the button with a force that made the metal door tremble. The elevator opened with a soft ding, and they both stepped inside. Jack pressed the button for the ground floor. As the elevator began its descent, Maya could feel her heart racing. She wanted to ask Jack what was happening, why Officer Donovan was still searching for her, but she couldn't find the words. All she knew was that her stepfather was dangerous. He had always been mean to her, but it had never been like this. "He's going to take me back," Maya said, her voice trembling. "He wants to hurt me." Jack's jaw tightened, and his eyes flashed with determination. "No, Maya. He's not taking you anywhere. We're getting you out of here." The elevator doors opened with a soft ding, and they stepped out into the lobby. Jack led the way, guiding Maya through the hospital's maze-like corridors. As they reached the main entrance, Jack spotted 2 security guards standing near the front door. They were talking, unaware of the situation unfolding just a few feet away. Jack gestured for Maya to follow him closely as they made their way past them, staying low to avoid detection. They reached the parking lot without incident, where a large black van sat waiting. Jack opened the door, and Maya climbed in, her small body barely fitting into the seat. As Jack slammed the door shut, he turned to the driver, a man in his 50s with a weathered face. "Let's go," Jack said firmly. The van roared to life, and they sped away from the hospital, leaving the chaos behind them. Maya sank into the seat, still shaken but feeling safer than she had in hours. Jack turned to her with a reassuring smile. "You're going to be okay," he said. "We're going to take you somewhere safe." As the van pulled away, Maya couldn't help but feel a sense of relief. She didn't know where Jack was taking her, but for the first time in a long time, she felt like someone was finally looking out for her. Someone who cared. "I'm not sure where we're going, Jack," Maya whispered, her voice trembling as she sat in the back of the van. The streets outside the windows blurred, lights streaking past like distant stars. The van's tires hummed against the pavement, the sound of the engine steady, but her heart was anything but calm. "You're safe now, Maya," Jack replied, his tone calm, but firm as he kept his eyes on the road ahead. He wasn't sure where they were going either, but he would take her anywhere she needed to go. He had made a promise to her father, and he wasn't about to break it. Maya stared out the window, her small hands gripping the seat. She wasn't used to this. The silence in the van felt heavier than the hospital hallway she had just escaped. She had never felt more out of place in her life. Her father had always told her that Jack would be there if anything went wrong, but even now, she wasn't sure how much she could trust anyone anymore. All she knew was that she couldn't go back to that place. She couldn't go back to the man who had hurt her and her mother. "What if he finds me, Jack?" Maya asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Jack glanced in the rearview mirror, his face hardening. "He won't find you. Not while I'm here. I'm not letting anyone take you again." Maya swallowed hard, her stomach a knot of fear. "But what if he knows where we're going?" Jack kept his gaze steady, the road ahead unfolding into the night. "We're going to a safe place, Maya. A place he won't find you. And if he does, we'll be ready for him. You're not alone." Jack's voice held the weight of the promise, and for the first time in what felt like forever, Maya let herself believe it. The van rumbled along, and Maya closed her eyes, trying to block out the fear that still clung to her. It wasn't until they had driven for what seemed like hours that the van finally pulled into a parking lot. The area was quiet, the only sound coming from the van's engine winding down as it came to a stop. Jack turned to Maya, his expression softening. "We're here," he said gently. Stay close to me. We're just going to go inside for a bit and rest. Maya nodded, her hands still trembling, but she felt a flicker of hope deep inside her. Jack opened the door, the cool night air hitting them as they stepped out of the van. They were in front of a small, nondescript building. Nothing fancy, just a simple place that seemed to blend into the darkness. The building had a faint glow from the porch light, casting long shadows on the ground. It didn't look like much, but to Maya, it felt like a lifeline. She followed Jack closely as they walked up to the door. He knocked twice, and a moment later, the door swung open. A tall man with a weathered face and a strong build stepped into view. "Jack," he said, his voice gruff but friendly. "Good to see you." Jack nodded, a tight smile forming on his face. "This is Maya," he said, his hand resting on her shoulder. "She's in trouble. We need to keep her safe for a while." The man, who was wearing a leather vest with patches that looked familiar to Maya, stepped aside to let them in. "Of course," he said, his eyes scanning the street behind them. "Come on in. We've been expecting you." Maya felt a chill run through her as they entered the small, dimly lit house. It wasn't like anything she had imagined, but something about the place made her feel like she could finally breathe again. The man led them into a room at the back of the house, where a few other people were sitting around, talking quietly. They all stopped when they saw Jack and Maya, and their eyes lingered on the girl, sizing her up. Jack gave them a brief nod, and the man who had answered the door, whose name Maya learned was Derek, motioned for them to sit. "I'll make sure she's taken care of," Derek said, his tone reassuring. "You can rest easy, Jack. We've got her covered." Maya sat down, feeling the weight of the last few days slowly start to lift off her shoulders. She didn't know where this place was or who these people were, but for the first time since that night in the hospital, she felt a small sense of peace. As the door shut behind them, Jack's voice broke the silence. "I'm not leaving you, Maya. You're safe now. I promise." Maya looked up at him, her heart still heavy but lighter than it had been. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for coming for me." Jack gave her a reassuring smile. "Your family, Maya. That's what family does." I sat quietly in the room, the soft hum of conversation in the background, but my mind was racing. I had never been in a place like this before. It wasn't a hospital, not a safe house, and it definitely didn't feel like home. But it felt like a haven, a place where I could finally catch my breath. I looked around, seeing the faces of the people who had already gathered here, strangers to me, yet they seemed like family. There was Derek, the man who had opened the door for us, his weathered face carrying an air of authority. He looked out for everyone. Here, like a protector. Around the room, there were others, big men with hard faces, but their eyes were kind. A woman, her hair pulled back in a ponytail, gave me a small nod as she sat near the window. She didn't say anything, but her presence was comforting, almost like she understood exactly how I was feeling. Jack, who had been my guardian angel throughout this, sat beside me, his hand resting lightly on my shoulder. He hadn't let go of me since we arrived. It felt strange, but in a good way. He had made a promise to my father, and now I was learning that promises meant something to him. I had never known anyone like Jack. He had this way about him that made me feel like I was safe, even in the middle of all this chaos. I still couldn't wrap my mind around what had happened. My stepfather, Officer Patrick Donovan, had been the person I thought I could trust, but he wasn't that man anymore. The man I had seen in the hospital, searching for me, was someone I didn't even recognize. I couldn't stay with him. I couldn't go back. "Are you okay?" Jack asked, his voice low and steady, pulling me out of my thoughts. I looked up at him, meeting his steady gaze. "I'm fine," I said, though I wasn't entirely sure if I believed myself. My hands were still trembling, but I didn't want to show it. I didn't want to feel weak. But the truth was, I was terrified. I had no idea what was happening next. No idea where we were going from here. I had never been more uncertain about my future. "You don't have to be afraid anymore," Jack said, his voice firm. "I'm here. We're going to figure this out, okay?" I nodded, but the words didn't seem to make the fear go away. The night had stretched on, and as I sat in the quiet room, I felt the exhaustion of the day beginning to hit me. The worry, the fear, the adrenaline, it was all catching up. I wanted to sleep, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something bad was still coming. I couldn't close my eyes without thinking about Donovan, about the look in his eyes when he had last seen me. I didn't want to think about it. "What happens now?" I asked Jack, my voice barely above a whisper. He hesitated for a moment before answering. We keep you safe. That's all that matters right now. He paused, his expression softening. We have a few people working on this. You're not alone in this anymore, Maya. Just then, the door to the room opened, and a man I hadn't seen before stepped in. He was tall, with dark hair and a scar that ran along his jaw. There was something about him that made him look like he had seen his fair share of battles. He carried himself with the same quiet strength I had seen in Jack, but there was a different kind of intensity in his eyes. Jack, the man said, his voice low and steady. We need to talk. Jack stood up immediately, his hand still resting on my shoulder. I'll be right back, he said, his voice soft but serious. I nodded, trying to stay calm. As Jack walked toward the man, I felt a slight pang of unease in my chest. What was going on? Who was this man? What was happening next? My mind was racing again, but I tried to take deep breaths. I didn't want to feel like a prisoner in this room. I wanted to know what was going to happen. I wanted to be in control of my own life again. As Jack and the man spoke in low voices, I caught snippets of their conversation, words like Donovan and backup, but nothing that made sense to me. I couldn't make out all the words, but I didn't need to. I could feel the tension in the air. It wasn't over. This wasn't over. The door closed behind Jack, and I was left alone in the room with my thoughts. My hands were shaking again, but this time, I couldn't stop it. I needed answers. I needed to know what was going to happen. The silence in the room was deafening, and I couldn't help but feel like it was the calm before the storm. I sat in the dimly lit room, my mind racing. Jack had left with the man, leaving me alone with my thoughts. My heart was still pounding in my chest, and I couldn't stop thinking about Donovan. I knew he would stop at nothing to find me, and as much as Jack had reassured me, I couldn't shake the feeling that danger was still lurking around every corner. The man Jack had been talking to seemed important, and I couldn't help but wonder what was really going on. I wanted to ask Jack, to understand what was happening, but I knew it wasn't the right time. The door creaked open, and I looked up quickly, expecting it to be Jack. But instead, it was Derek, the man who had welcomed us into this small, nondescript house. He stood in the doorway, his eyes scanning the room before locking onto mine. How are you holding up? He asked, his voice softer than I had expected. I nodded, forcing a smile, though I could feel the anxiety swirling inside me. I'm okay, I lied. Derek stepped into the room, his heavy boots echoing in the silence. He closed the door behind him, then crossed the room to sit across from me. His presence was commanding, but there was a calmness about him that made me feel slightly more at ease. You're safe here, Maya, Derek said, his voice steady. You don't have to worry about anything right now. We'll protect you. I wanted to believe him, I really did, but part of me still felt like I was in a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. I had been running for so long, and even though I was away from Donovan, I couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't over. What happens now? I asked quietly, my voice barely above a whisper. Derek leaned back in his chair, his eyes thoughtful. Now we wait. We need to figure out what Donovan's next move is. He's dangerous, Maya. He won't stop until he gets what he wants. I felt a chill run through me at his words. The thought of Donovan coming after me again was terrifying, but I had no idea what he was capable of. But I don't understand, I said, my voice trembling slightly. Why would he do this? Why would he hurt me? Derek's gaze softened, and he sighed, as if he had been waiting for this question. Sometimes people do things for power, for control, and sometimes they just don't know how to stop once they've started. I looked down at my hands, my fingers twisting nervously. I was still trying to make sense of everything. My stepfather, the man who was supposed to take care of me, had turned into a stranger. A dangerous one. Is he coming after me because of what happened to my mom? I asked, my voice small. Derek paused for a moment, clearly choosing his words carefully. Your mom's death wasn't an accident, Maya. And Donovan knows it. He's just been hiding the truth. The room seemed to spin for a moment, and I had to steady myself against the table. What do you mean? I whispered, my heart beating faster. Derek leaned forward, his voice low and serious. Your mother was involved in something before she passed. Something that Donovan didn't want anyone to find out about. But now, it's catching up to him. I shook my head, trying to make sense of his words. What does that have to do with me? Derek stood up slowly, his face hardening. It's not just you he's after, Maya. He's trying to cover his tracks, and you're the only one left who can expose him. He won't stop until he silences you for good. I felt my breath catch in my throat, the weight of his words sinking in. I had been running from something much bigger than I had realized. And Donovan wasn't going to let me go easily. Derek reached out and placed a hand on my shoulder, his grip firm but reassuring. But you're not alone in this anymore. You have us now. And we won't let him hurt you. For the first time since everything had started, I felt a small sense of relief. Maybe I wasn't entirely powerless in this fight. Maybe, just maybe, I had a chance. Just then, the door opened again, and Jack walked in, his expression tense. "We've got a problem," he said, his voice low. My heart skipped a beat. "What happened?" I asked, standing up quickly. Jack looked at me, his eyes filled with determination. "Donovan knows where we are, and he's not going to stop until he gets you back." I froze as Jack's words hit me like a punch to the gut. Donovan knew where we were. It wasn't just the fear that had been eating at me for days anymore. Now it was real, tangible. I could almost feel the cold dread settle over me like a blanket. How had he found us? I looked up at Jack, who stood near the door. His face hard, but with an edge of concern I had seen only a few times before. "What do we do now?" I asked, my voice shaking, barely a whisper. Jack glanced at Derek, then back at me. "We need to move. Now." Derek's expression didn't change, but I could see the tension in his posture. He nodded. "I'll make some calls," he said, his voice low. He didn't need to say more. He was already on it. Jack walked over to me, his face softening slightly as he knelt in front of me. "Maya, listen to me. This isn't over. You're not alone in this. We'll make sure you're safe." I nodded, though my mind was racing. I knew I wasn't alone physically, but the fear I felt. How could anyone protect me from someone who wouldn't stop? Someone who knew all the right places to strike. But what if he comes here? What if he comes for me again? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Jack placed his hand on my shoulder, the weight of it grounding me for a moment. "We won't let that happen," he said firmly. His words were full of conviction, but I could see the shadow of worry in his eyes. He was doing his best to reassure me, but I knew he was worried too. I wanted to believe him, but the more I thought about Donovan's cold stare, the more I wondered how much of this was under control. Jack stood up and turned to the others in the room. "Get ready. We're leaving in 20 minutes. We're not staying here." The urgency in his voice left no room for doubt. This was real. The danger was close. I had to move, but my body felt heavy. The uncertainty was paralyzing. I still couldn't fully understand why Donovan was after me, after my mother. The memories of those nights with him seemed so distant, and yet so recent. I had spent years trying to pretend he wasn't who he really was, convincing myself he would change. Now, I was paying the price for that denial. My thoughts were broken by the sound of footsteps approaching. I looked up to see Derek walk over, his phone to his ear. "Yes," he said, his voice steady. "Make sure the safe house is ready. We'll be there in 20 minutes. And get someone on the inside at the hospital. We don't know who he's working with yet." The conversation was over as quickly as it had started. Derek hung up and looked at me. "We're moving you to a safer location. There's no time to waste." I swallowed hard, trying to steady my nerves. I wanted to ask questions, so many questions, but there wasn't time for that now. There wasn't time for anything but to move, to run. The thought of running, of leaving everything behind again, made my chest tighten, but there was no choice. I couldn't stay here. I wouldn't let Donovan find me again. As Jack and Derek began to gather their things, I stood up, my legs feeling like they might give out from under me. I looked around the room, taking in the faces of the people who had stepped in to help me. People I didn't even know, yet here they were, ready to fight for my safety. "Thank you," I said, my voice barely audible. Derek gave me a small, reassuring nod. "We're family now. We protect our own." I nodded, trying to find the courage in his words. For the first time in days, I felt something close to hope. It wasn't much, but it was enough to keep me moving forward. Jack stepped forward, his hand resting on the small of my back. "Let's go. We need to move, now." I nodded, and we made our way to the door. Derek led the way, checking outside before giving us the all-clear. As we stepped into the night, I couldn't help but feel the weight of what was to come. Donovan wasn't going to stop, but neither were we. And with every step I took, I knew I was one step closer to being free from him. One step closer to being safe. I didn't know where we were going, but the deep hum of the van's engine seemed to be the only sound that mattered. We were moving fast, the lights from the passing streetlights casting eerie shadows inside the van. Jack was at the wheel, his hands gripping the steering wheel with a steady, unwavering strength. Derek sat next to him, his phone pressed to his ear as he spoke in hushed tones, making arrangements for our next stop. It was clear from the tone of his voice that things were escalating faster than we had hoped. We were no longer in a race against time. We were in a race against Donovan. My mind was spinning. I had tried so hard to keep my family together, to ignore the cracks in the surface, but now I was realizing just how deep those cracks went. My stepfather, the man I had grown up with, the man who had promised to protect me, had turned into something else entirely. He was hunting me. He had already hurt my mother, and now he was coming for me. I couldn't understand why. What had I done to deserve this? I glanced over at Jack, sitting in the driver's seat, his face tight with concentration. He had been by my side since the moment my world had come crashing down, but I could see the worry etched in his features. He wasn't just protecting me out of duty. He was protecting me because he had promised my father. I was more than just a responsibility to him. "We'll be safe, Maya," Jack said, his voice steady, but there was an edge to it, like he was trying to reassure himself as much as me. I nodded, but the tightness in my chest didn't go away. I had to trust him. There was no other choice. Derek's voice broke into my thoughts. "The safe house is clear. We'll be there in 15 minutes. Get ready," he said, hanging up the phone. His words were a reminder that we couldn't stop moving. We had to keep ahead of Donovan. Jack's eyes flicked to the rearview mirror, then back to the road, his jaw tight. "He'll be looking for us," he muttered, more to himself than to anyone else. "But we won't make it easy for him." I wanted to say something, to ask more questions, but the words didn't come. The silence in the van was thick, the kind of silence that only comes in moments of absolute focus. My mind was still racing. It wasn't just Donovan I was running from. It was everything. The lies, the secrets, the darkness I had been trying to escape for years. And now I was stuck in the middle of it all, with no way out but forward. 15 minutes. That's all we had. My hands gripped the edge of the seat as I leaned forward, the tension in my body building. I could feel the weight of everything bearing down on me. I had no idea what would happen when we reached the safe house. Would it even be safe? Would we be able to escape Donovan's reach? What if he found us before we could even settle in? The questions swirled in my mind, unanswered and endless. Jack glanced at me, his gaze softening as he noticed my tension. "We're almost there," he said, his voice reassuring. "Just a little longer." I nodded, trying to steady my breathing. But the fear wouldn't leave. My whole life had been turned upside down in the span of a few days, and I didn't know if I could keep going. I didn't know if I was strong enough. The van slowed as we approached a small building on the edge of town. It was nondescript, just a simple house tucked away in a quiet neighborhood. No one would think twice about it. That's exactly why it was perfect. Derek was the first one out, scanning the area as he opened the door. Jack followed, his hand on my shoulder, guiding me out of the van. The moment my feet hit the ground, I felt the weight of the past few days lift off my shoulders, just a little. We had made it. For now. But I knew it wasn't over. It would never be over until Donovan was stopped. We moved quickly, entering the house in silence. The door clicked shut behind us, and we were inside. The air was cool and smelled like fresh wood, nothing unusual. But it felt safe. At least for the moment. Jack led me through the small hallway and into the living room. There was a fire crackling softly in the fireplace, and a man with graying hair stood by the window, looking outside. He was tall, muscular, with a quiet strength that reminded me of Jack. "This is my friend, Marcus," Jack said, introducing him. "He's one of the few people I trust." Marcus nodded in greeting, his eyes warm but focused. "We're going to keep you safe here, Maya. You don't have to worry about a thing." I didn't know Marcus, but something about the way he spoke made me believe him. I wasn't alone here. And for the first time in days, I felt the tiniest bit of hope. But as I looked at Jack, I knew the truth. This wasn't over. Donovan was still out there, and he would keep coming for me. But as long as I had Jack, Marcus, and the others, I would keep fighting. I would keep running. And I wouldn't stop until I was safe. I sat in the quiet living room, the soft flicker of the fire casting shadows on the walls. My hands were still trembling slightly from the rush of everything that had happened, but the warmth of the room felt like a small comfort, something I hadn't experienced in what felt like forever. Jack sat across from me, his eyes still scanning the room, watching for any signs of danger. Derek was at the door, his hand resting on the handle, as if he was expecting someone. I had no idea what was going to happen next. I had no idea if this place was truly safe or just another temporary hiding spot. My heart was racing, but the longer I sat there, the more I realized that it wasn't just fear that had me on edge. It was the weight of everything. My stepfather, my mother, the lies, the threats. And now, even though I was away from him, I knew Donovan wasn't going to let me go easily. "We need to talk." Jack's voice broke through the silence, his tone serious but soft. I looked up, meeting his gaze. "What is it?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. He shifted in his seat, his face hardening. "I'm not going to lie to you, Maya. Donovan won't stop. Not until he gets what he wants. And we need to be ready." My stomach twisted, and I felt the familiar knot of fear tighten in my chest. "What do you mean? What does he want?" Jack leaned forward, his eyes focused. "He's trying to cover something up. Something bigger than just you. But you're part of it now. And he knows you're the last piece." My mind was spinning. I hadn't understood before, but now it was starting to make sense. "So it's not just about me?" I whispered, the truth settling in. "No," Jack replied. "It's about your mother. She knew something, and Donovan is desperate to keep it quiet." The words hit me like a punch. My mother had been caught up in something far more dangerous than I ever realized. And now I was in the middle of it. The realization was overwhelming, and for a moment, I felt dizzy. "What do we do?" I asked, my voice barely audible. "We stay quiet. We stay under the radar. And we figure out what Donovan is hiding. We can't run forever, Maya. We need answers." Jack stood up, moving towards the door where Derek was standing. The two of them exchanged a few words, their voices low, but I could hear the urgency in their tone. I wanted to ask more, to demand answers, but I knew better. They were doing everything they could to protect me. "We've got a plan," Jack said, turning back to me. "But we need your help." I looked at him, confused. "My help?" I asked. "How can I help?" Jack paused, his expression softening. "We need to know everything your mother was involved in. We need to know who she was talking to, what she was hiding. And most importantly, we need to know what Donovan is really after." My heart skipped a beat. I had always been close to my mother, but I never thought she was keeping secrets from me. "I don't know where to start," I said, feeling overwhelmed. Jack placed a reassuring hand on my shoulder. "We'll start small. You remember anything she said, anything that seemed off?" I thought for a moment, my mind drifting back to the times when I'd overheard snippets of her conversations with Donovan. They never seemed like anything important at the time, just casual arguments about bills, about things that didn't make sense. But now, with everything that had happened, I wondered if there was more. "There was something," I began, my voice barely above a whisper. "She mentioned a name. Marcus. She seemed upset about something to do with him, but I didn't know who he was." Jack's eyes sharpened. "Marcus," he repeated, as if the name meant something to him. "Did she say anything else?" I shook my head. "No, that's all. It was just one night, and I never thought it was important." Jack's expression hardened again. "It is important. We need to find out who this Marcus is and what he's got to do with all of this." Derek stepped forward, his face grim. "I'll look into it," he said. "But we can't waste time. Donovan could be closer than we think." Jack nodded, his jaw set. "We move in the morning. Get some rest, Maya. We'll figure this out." As they left the room, I sat there in the silence, my mind spinning. Marcus? What did he have to do with all of this? And how did he fit into the puzzle that Donovan had created? I had no answers, but I knew one thing for sure. This was far from over. Donovan was still out there, and he would stop at nothing to keep his secrets hidden. I had to stay strong. For my mother, for myself, and for the people who had promised to protect me. I woke up early the next morning to the sound of a soft knock on the door. It had been a restless night, filled with too many thoughts, too many questions. Donovan, Marcus, my mother's secrets. It was all too much. I had barely slept, the weight of everything pressing down on me. The door creaked open, and Jack stepped inside. His face was serious, but his eyes held a certain calmness that I needed right now. "We're moving out in 30 minutes, he said, his voice steady. "Are you ready?" I nodded, sitting up in bed. "I think so." The truth was, I didn't feel ready. How could anyone ever be ready for something like this? But I knew there was no turning back now. Donovan wasn't going to stop until he found me, and I had to keep moving. Jack stood by the door for a moment, watching me. "I know this is a lot, Maya," he said, his voice softer now. "But we've got your back. You're not alone in this." I forced a smile, but it felt thin, almost fragile. I know, I whispered. He nodded and stepped back, closing the door gently behind him. I stood up, stretching my arms, and trying to shake off the fatigue that clung to me. The small room felt even smaller in the early morning light, the walls closing in as I prepared myself for what was next. I had no idea what was waiting for us, but I couldn't sit here anymore. I had to keep moving. When I walked into the living room, I saw Derek, Marcus, and Jack already gathered near the door, ready to go. Derek's face was serious, his hand resting on the grip of a large duffel bag. Marcus stood by the window, his eyes scanning the street outside. Jack was adjusting his jacket, his expression unreadable. They all looked like they were bracing themselves for something. "What's the plan?" I asked, trying to sound more confident than I felt. Derek turned to me, his eyes dark with concern. "We're heading to a location just outside of town. It's a safe house, but we don't know how much time we have before Donovan figures out where we are." "And Marcus?" I asked, my eyes moving to the man by the window. "Marcus is coming with us," Jack answered, his tone firm. "He's a good man, Maya. We trust him." Marcus gave me a small nod, but didn't say anything. I wasn't sure how much I trusted him, but I had to take Jack's word for it. I couldn't afford to doubt anyone right now. "We'll leave in separate cars," Derek continued. "Keep your heads down, stay low. We can't afford any mistakes." I nodded, my heart pounding in my chest. The reality of the situation was starting to set in. This wasn't just a run from danger anymore. This was survival. Donovan wasn't just after me. He was after everything my mother knew, everything that had been buried. I could feel the walls closing in, but I couldn't stop. I had to keep moving. The car ride was long and tense. We didn't speak much, the weight of everything pressing on us. I couldn't stop thinking about my mother, about the things she had kept from me, the secrets she had hidden, the people she had been involved with. And now I was caught in the middle of it all. As the miles passed, I kept my eyes on the road ahead, trying to focus on something, anything, other than the fear that gnawed at me. What would happen when we reached the safe house? Would it really be safe? Would Donovan find us before we had a chance to settle in? I glanced over at Jack, who was sitting next to me, his eyes focused on the road. He looked calm, but I knew better. He was just as worried as I was. Maybe more so. He had promised my father that he would protect me, but I didn't want to be the reason Jack got pulled into this mess. He didn't deserve that. We finally arrived at the house, a small, unassuming building on the outskirts of town. It didn't look like much, but that was the point. It blended into the landscape, hidden from prying eyes. As we pulled into the driveway, I felt a small sense of relief. But it was fleeting. There was still so much to do, so many unanswered questions. Derek led the way inside, his eyes scanning the area as he moved. Jack and Marcus followed, and I brought up the rear, my heart still racing. Once inside, the door clicked shut behind us. The house was sparse, but it felt secure, locked windows, sturdy doors, and no sign of anyone else around. Derek quickly got to work, setting up a few security measures, while Marcus and Jack checked the surroundings. I stood by the window, watching them move with practiced efficiency. I didn't know how they knew how to handle situations like this, but it was clear they had done it before. "We'll be safe here for now," Jack said, his voice steady as he walked over to me. "But we need to stay alert. Donovan will come for us, and we can't let our guard down." I nodded, trying to take in the gravity of his words. The world outside might have seemed calm, but inside, I knew the storm was still coming. I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. We had been in the safe house for just a few hours, and already, the tension was unbearable. Derek, Jack, and Marcus had all gone through the place with a fine-tooth comb, securing the doors and windows, setting up alarms, and checking the perimeter. Still, I couldn't stop thinking about Donovan. What was he doing? Was he closing in on us? I walked over to the small window by the kitchen, looking out at the still, empty street. The only movement was the wind rustling the trees. But the quiet didn't comfort me, it unnerved me. I had never felt more alone in my life. As I stood there, lost in thought, I heard the sound of footsteps behind me. Jack appeared in the doorway, his eyes scanning the room before they settled on me. "You okay?" he asked, his voice soft but serious. I didn't want to admit it, but I wasn't okay. "I don't know," I said, turning to face him. I can't stop thinking about what happens next." Jack nodded, his expression unreadable. "I get it. But for now, this is the safest place we can be. We just need to lay low and wait. I wanted to believe him. I really did. But I couldn't ignore the gnawing feeling in my stomach. I hadn't felt safe in so long. Not with Donovan on my trail. And I wasn't sure if hiding here was going to be enough. Jack must have sensed my unease because he stepped closer. Look, he said, his voice steady. I'm not going to lie to you. It's going to be tough. But we're not giving up. Not now, not ever. I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. I had to trust him. I had to. I know, I whispered. But I just keep thinking about my mom. What if she's still in danger? Jack's jaw tightened. We'll figure that out. But right now, we need to keep you safe. We can't do anything if we don't have a plan. We need to know what we're up against. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. Jack was right. I couldn't help my mom if I wasn't safe. But what if she needed me? What if she was in more danger than we thought? What happens if Donovan finds us here? I asked, my voice trembling. Jack looked out the window, his gaze hardening. If he finds us, we fight back. We've got the upper hand right now. He doesn't know we're here, and we're not making it easy for him. The words felt like a promise, but the fear in my chest didn't let up. I knew Donovan wouldn't stop. He was relentless, and I had no idea how long we could stay hidden. Just then, Derek entered the room, his face grim. We've got a problem, he said. My heart skipped a beat. What is it? Jack asked, his voice tight. I've been checking our communications, Derek said, pulling out his phone. I've seen some signs that Donovan's people might be closer than we thought. They're moving in. He's using every resource he has to track us down. I felt a chill run through me at his words. So what do we do now? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Derek looked at Jack. We don't stay here. It's not safe anymore. Jack nodded. I agree. We leave. Now. A sense of urgency filled the room, and suddenly everything felt like it was moving in fast forward. We couldn't afford to wait. We had to leave, and we had to leave immediately. Derek started packing up a few things while Jack walked over to me. Maya, listen, Jack said, his voice low. We need you to stay calm. We're going to move quickly, and we're going to stay ahead of him. But you've got to trust us. I nodded, though my heart was racing. Trust them? I didn't know how much longer I could trust anyone. But there was no choice. I had to stay focused. I had to keep moving forward. Are we going to split up? I asked, looking at Derek and Marcus. Jack shook his head. No. We stick together. This is about getting to the next safe house. Derek and Marcus exchanged a brief glance, but said nothing. I could see they were ready for whatever came next. They had been through things like this before. This was nothing new to them. But for me, this was a whole new world. As we moved quickly toward the back door, Jack stopped and turned to look at me. Stay close, Maya. No matter what happens, stay close. I nodded, my heart pounding in my chest. There was no going back now. We were on the move again, and I knew it was only a matter of time before Donovan found us. But we wouldn't make it easy for him. Not this time. We had the upper hand. We had to. There was no other option. I could feel the tension building in the air as we hurried through the back door and into the alley behind the house. The darkness outside seemed to swallow us whole, the only sounds being the quickened footsteps of our group moving swiftly to the car parked at the end of the alley. Jack led the way, his body tense, every movement calculated. Derek and Marcus followed closely, their eyes scanning the street, always alert. I stayed close to Jack, my heart pounding in my chest. I knew this was it. The moment we left the relative safety of the house, there was no turning back. The streetlights flickered above us, casting long shadows that seemed to stretch out with every step. I could hear the sound of my breath, shallow and fast, matching the rapid beating of my heart. My mind kept racing back to Donovan. Where was he? How close was he to finding us? We had been prepared for this moment, but nothing could truly prepare us for the danger that was so close. As we reached the car, Derek slid into the driver's seat, and Marcus took the front passenger seat. Jack opened the back door for me, and I got in quickly, trying to suppress the rising panic inside me. Once inside, Jack slid in beside me, the door shutting with a soft click. The car started, its engine purring to life, and we pulled away from the house. My body was stiff with fear, but I forced myself to take deep breaths, trying to steady myself. The car drove through the quiet streets, the lights outside blending into one continuous blur. I couldn't stop looking over my shoulder, half expecting Donovan's car to be right behind us, closing in on us. It didn't help that I couldn't see where we were going. We were leaving everything behind, and I had no idea where we were headed next. All I knew was that I couldn't go back. Jack must have noticed my unease because he reached over and gently placed his hand on mine. "You're doing great, Maya," he said quietly, his voice reassuring, though I could hear the underlying tension in it. "We've got this." I nodded, squeezing his hand for a brief moment before pulling it back. "But what if he finds us again?" I asked, my voice trembling. "What if he's still looking for me?" Jack's gaze remained forward, his eyes narrowed with focus as the car sped down the empty streets. "We keep moving," he said, his voice firm. "We'll stay ahead of him. He won't catch us." I wanted to believe him, but the truth was, I didn't know if I could. I had never been in a situation like this, and Donovan was a man who would do anything to get what he wanted. As the car turned a corner, I glanced out the window, looking for any signs of movement, but all I saw was the endless stretch of road ahead of us. The silence in the car was oppressive, and I found myself staring at the shadows outside, my mind wandering. Suddenly, Derek's voice broke the quiet. "We're almost there," he said, his tone calm, though I could hear the edge of urgency in it. "Stay sharp, everyone." Jack leaned forward, glancing out the front window. "Where exactly are we going?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "A backup location," Derek replied quickly, his eyes scanning the rearview mirror. "It's further out of town. We'll be safer there." I nodded, though a part of me still felt uneasy. We had been running for so long. Was this place really going to be safe? Would it hold up against Donovan's reach? Jack seemed to sense my concern. "We've got eyes on everything, Maya," he said, his voice low but reassuring. "We won't let anything happen to you." As we drove further into the night, I couldn't help but wonder what lay ahead. Were we just running from one danger to another? Was there any end to this? Or would we be on the move forever, always looking over our shoulders, never truly safe? The car sped down the winding road, the headlights illuminating the darkness ahead. The world outside seemed to blur, and for a moment, it felt like we were the only ones left in the world. It was strange, the way the car became our world, our sanctuary. But even as I tried to cling to the safety of the moment, the reality of what was happening weighed heavily on me. My mother's death, Donovan's actions, the secrets we had yet to uncover. Everything was connected, and I had no idea how deep the rabbit hole went. The car finally slowed as we approached a small, secluded building at the edge of town. It looked unremarkable, hidden among the trees, almost as if it didn't belong. But to me, it was a lifeline. Derek parked the car and cut the engine, the silence in the vehicle now deafening. We had made it, for now. We were safe, at least for the moment. Jack opened his door and stepped out, looking around before signaling for me to follow. I hesitated, my body still tense from the constant state of alert, but I didn't argue. I stepped out of the car and into the cold night air, the feeling of safety slowly settling over me. But even as we walked toward the building, I couldn't shake the nagging feeling that it wasn't over. Donovan would come, and when he did, we had to be ready. I stepped into the dimly lit room, the air inside thick with tension. The small building, which was meant to be our refuge, felt more like a cage. Jack followed me in, his eyes scanning every corner, every shadow. The place was sparsely furnished, bare wooden floors, a few old chairs, and a single table in the center of the room. Derek and Marcus were already inside, moving quickly, setting things up. Derek was on the phone, speaking in low, urgent tones, while Marcus was checking the windows, making sure everything was secure. I felt like I was caught in the middle of something I couldn't control, something that was spiraling out of my hands. We had escaped one danger, only to walk straight into another. I didn't know how much longer we could keep running. The reality of what was happening hit me like a wave. My mother was gone, and now Donovan was after me. The man I had once called a father had turned into a monster. I couldn't help but wonder what he had done to my mother, what he was hiding. "We're safe here for now," Jack said, his voice cutting through my thoughts. I turned to face him, trying to steady my breathing. "But for how long?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Jack didn't answer immediately. Instead, he walked over to the window, peering out through the blinds. I could see the strain in his shoulders, the weight of the promise he had made to my father. He was doing everything he could to keep me safe, but I could see the doubt in his eyes. How long could we keep running? How long could we stay ahead of Donovan? "We'll be ready if he comes," Jack said, turning back to face me. "But we need to figure out what he's after. We need to know what he's hiding." I nodded, though I didn't feel any better. The truth was, I didn't know what I could do. I didn't know what information I could offer, what could possibly stop Donovan from getting to me. The door creaked open, and Marcus stepped inside, his face grim. "We've got company," he said quietly. My stomach dropped at the words. "How close?" Jack asked, his voice tense. "Too close," Marcus replied, his eyes hardening. "We need to move. Now." Derek hung up the phone, his expression now more serious than I had seen it. "They're on their way," he said, walking toward us. "We don't have much time." Panic surged in my chest. I had barely gotten a moment to breathe, and now we were running again. I wasn't ready for this. I didn't know if I could keep doing this. "What now?" I asked, my voice shaking. Jack turned to me, his gaze steady but filled with urgency. "We leave. We head for the backup location. No time to waste." Derek quickly gathered the essentials, his phone, a few documents, and a small bag of supplies. Marcus was already at the door, checking the surroundings. The tension was palpable, the urgency in the air suffocating. I felt paralyzed, but Jack reached for my hand, his grip firm. "Maya, we can't stop now. We keep moving. We'll figure this out. Together." His words were meant to reassure me, but I could still see the uncertainty in his eyes. I was scared, terrified actually, but I didn't have a choice. There was no turning back. Jack opened the door and motioned for me to follow. I stepped out into the night, the cool air biting at my skin. We moved quickly, slipping through the alley and onto the main street. I kept my head down, my mind racing with thoughts of Donovan, of what was waiting for us around the corner. We were about to make another escape, but this time, I wasn't sure we could outrun him. As we reached the cars, I could feel the adrenaline kicking in, the sharp edge of fear coursing through my veins. Derek slid into the driver's seat, and Marcus took the front passenger seat, while Jack and I got into the back. The car engine roared to life, and we sped off into the night. The streets outside blurred into a haze of lights and shadows. The weight of the world seemed to press down on me, but I couldn't stop now. The fear, the confusion, it all felt like it was closing in. "How far?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Not far," Jack replied. "We'll be out of here soon. Stay calm." I wanted to believe him, but I could feel the knot in my stomach tightening. I didn't know where we were going. I didn't know who I could trust anymore. I just knew that I couldn't stop running, no matter how scared I was. As the car sped down the road, I caught a glimpse of something in the rearview mirror, just a flash of headlights behind us. I couldn't tell if it was Donovan's car, but the feeling in my gut told me that it was. My pulse quickened, and I leaned forward, pressing myself against the seat, my eyes darting to the back window. The car behind us was still there, gaining on us. "We've got company," I said, my voice barely a whisper. Jack's eyes met mine in the rearview mirror. "Stay calm," he said again, but this time, I could hear the edge in his voice. We were being followed, and this time, it wasn't just Donovan. It was his people. The game had changed. We weren't running from one threat anymore. We were running from everything. The car's tires screeched as it swerved around another tight corner, the engine roaring louder as Derek pushed the pedal to the metal. My heart was pounding in my chest, and I couldn't tear my eyes away from the rearview mirror. The headlights behind us were closer now, too close. Donovan's people were catching up, and the realization hit me hard. There was no escaping this. "They're right behind us," I said, my voice barely above a whisper, the fear creeping into every word. Jack, sitting beside me, didn't even flinch. His jaw was clenched tight, his eyes locked on the road ahead. "Stay calm," he said, his voice low but unwavering. "We're not going down without a fight." I could hear the sirens now, faint in the distance, but getting closer with every passing second. The road was getting more desolate, the buildings fewer, the lights dimmer. It felt like we were heading straight into the unknown, and I wasn't sure if that was better or worse. Derek glanced over at us from the front seat, his eyes focused but showing just a hint of urgency. "We're almost there," he said, trying to reassure us, but there was no hiding the tension in his voice. I knew exactly where we were going now, the backup location. But even as we neared it, I couldn't shake the feeling that it wouldn't be enough. We had barely made it out of the last place. What was stopping them from finding us here? The car whipped around another corner, and I could feel the tires losing grip for a moment before Derek regained control. My body lurched forward as the car sped faster, trying to outrun the chase. The engine's roar was the only sound that filled the car now, drowning out everything else. Hold on, Derek yelled as we turned down a narrow alleyway, the car's suspension bouncing as we hit a pothole. My stomach dropped as we skidded around another sharp turn. I looked over at Jack, who was still calm, his eyes scanning the road, his hands steady on his knees. We're not losing them, I muttered, almost to myself. Jack didn't respond, but I could see his muscles tense, the weight of the situation pressing down on him. He was ready to act when the moment came. The car lurched again as Derek slammed on the brakes, skidding into the parking lot of an old, abandoned warehouse. We came to a screeching halt, the engine cutting out as the car jolted to a stop. Derek turned to us, his face hard. Get out. Now. We wasted no time. Jack was already out of the car, his hand on my arm as he pulled me out with him. The cold night air hit me like a slap in the face, and I stumbled for a moment, my heart racing. We ran toward the warehouse, the sound of footsteps pounding behind us. I could hear the car doors slamming, the shouts of Donovan's men getting closer. Keep moving, Jack barked, pulling me faster toward the entrance. Derek and Marcus were already ahead, crouched low, checking for any movement. The warehouse loomed ahead, dark and imposing. The door was slightly ajar, and Jack kicked it open, his eyes scanning the dark interior. We sprinted inside, the sound of our footsteps echoing off the cold concrete walls. My breath came in quick gasps, but I couldn't stop now. I couldn't afford to stop. The door slammed shut behind us, and Jack immediately pressed his back against the wall, his eyes narrowing. They're coming. We need to hide, he said, his voice calm but urgent. The rest of us found cover quickly, slipping into the shadows, our backs pressed against the cold, unforgiving walls. I tried to slow my breathing, to quiet my racing heart, but the fear was overwhelming. I could hear them outside, shouting orders to each other, their voices growing louder as they approached. I was terrified. This was the moment I had been dreading, the moment I had been trying to outrun for days. But now here it was. We had nowhere to go, no place to hide, and Donovan was out there, hunting us. The seconds felt like hours, and every sound outside seemed to grow louder, more threatening. The metal door rattled as someone from the outside tried to force it open. My breath caught in my throat as I held my position, waiting for what would come next. Stay quiet, Jack whispered, his voice barely audible. We can't let them know we're in here. The door groaned as they pushed against it again. For a moment, everything seemed to stop. My entire body tensed, every muscle screaming for action, but I forced myself to stay still. Then, finally, the door opened wide, and I saw their figures silhouetted against the dim light outside. Donovan's men. They were here, and they were looking for us. Jack signaled for everyone to stay down, and I lowered myself closer to the floor, trying to make myself as small as possible. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might burst from my chest. I could hear their footsteps now, slow, deliberate. They were moving through the warehouse, checking every corner, every dark space. And all I could do was wait. I felt like a trapped animal, the walls closing in with every passing second. But as I lay there, trembling, something shifted in me. I couldn't run anymore. This was it. We were going to have to fight. Jack's eyes met mine in the darkness, and for the first time, I saw the same determination I felt burning in my chest. We weren't going to go down without a fight. Donovan wasn't going to win. Not this time.